In a raw, emotionally searing episode of American television drama Beyond the Gates, the camera barely blinks as Naomi finally collapses under the weight of the truth she has been carrying alone, delivering one of the most devastating mother-daughter confession scenes the series has ever attempted, let alone pulled off with such aching precision, as Naomi, hollow-eyed and shaking, stands in her childhood bedroom surrounded by the quiet ghosts of who she used to be, while her mother senses something is wrong long before a single word is spoken, because Beyond the Gates understands that silence can scream louder than dialogue, and Naomi's silence is thunderous, her hands trembling as she clutches the folded test results she swore she'd never show anyone, results she lied about, results she buried beneath forced smiles and rehearsed reassurances, results that told a far more terrifying story than the everything's fine version she fed her family, and when her mother gently asks no accusation, no pressure, just a soft, maternal "Naomi, talk to me." The dam finally breaks, Naomi's face crumpling as tears spill out in gasps, her voice cracking as she confesses that the test results weren't what she said they were, that the relief she pretended to feel never existed, that the numbers were wrong, the markers alarming, the future suddenly rewritten in clinical language that stripped her of certainty and replaced it with fear, and as she sobs she admits she was scared, not just of the diagnosis, but of what it would do to her mother, how she couldn't bear to see that look of helpless terror in her mom's eyes again, the same look she wore years ago during another crisis the family barely survived. And this is where the writing shines, because the confession isn't a single sentence but a flood, Naomi unraveling piece by piece, revealing that the normal results were a lie she told to keep everyone breathing easier, that the Real report warned of complications long-term implications, and choices no one her age should have to contemplate, and her mother, stunned but steady, doesn't interrupt, doesn't dramatize, doesn't rush to solutions. She simply sits with her daughter on the bed and lets Naomi cry until the sobs turn hoarse and desperate, until Naomi finally chokes out that she didn't want to be the problem again. A line that lands like a gut punch because it reframes everything we've seen from Naomi this season, her distance, her irritability, her self-sacrificing bravado, as survival tactics from a young woman terrified of becoming a burden, and when her mother finally speaks, it's not with anger over the lie but heartbreak over the loneliness Naomi endured to maintain it, her voice breaking as she tells Naomi that protecting her mother was never Naomi's job, that being strong doesn't mean being silent, that love isn't measured by how much pain you hide. And the scene crescendos not with melodrama, but with intimacy as Naomi hands over the test results, fingers reluctant to let go, as if the paper itself carries the power to hurt them both, and her mother reads them slowly, her face betraying flashes of fear she tries and fails to conceal, and in that moment the roles reverse briefly. Naomi watches her mother process the truth she's been shielding her from, and Naomi apologizes again and again, saying she thought she had more time, that she wanted one more stretch of normalcy before everything changed, that she didn't want hospital corridors and whispered phone calls to replace laughter at the dinner table, and her mother pulls her into a fierce embrace, telling her that whatever the results say, whatever comes next, they will face it together, that truth doesn't break families, secrets do, and the power of the scene lies in its refusal to offer easy answers, because the test results remain ominous, unresolved, hovering over the family like a gathering storm. But something essential shifts in that bedroom as honesty replaces isolation, and the audience is left breathless not because of a shocking twist, but because of the recognition of something deeply human, the instinct to protect the people we love by hurting ourselves. And as the episode fades out on Naomi resting her head on her mother's shoulder, eyes swollen, future uncertain, Beyond the Gates delivers a masterclass in emotional storytelling, proving that sometimes the most dramatic moment isn't a reveal shouted across a courtroom or a secret exposed at a gala, but a daughter finally whispering the truth to the one person she was most afraid to disappoint, and in doing so, reclaiming the right to be held, to be vulnerable, and to not face the unknown alone. The aftermath of Naomi's confession doesn't rush forward with neat resolutions, because Beyond the Gates knows better than to disrespect the gravity of what's just been spoken aloud. And instead, the episode lingers in the emotional fallout, stretching time so the audience can sit inside the discomfort alongside these two women, as Naomi's mother finally exhales a breath she didn't realize she'd been holding, the weight of the truth settling into her bones even as she keeps her arms wrapped around her daughter, and there's a quiet, almost imperceptible shift in Naomi's posture, her shoulders lower just a fraction, as if admitting the truth has loosened a knot she's been choking on for weeks, and yet the relief is tangled with fresh fear, because now the secret is real. Now it exists outside Naomi's chest, and her mother, ever the protector, begins asking questions not as an interrogator, but as a lifeline, carefully, gently, about dates, about doctors, about what exactly the test warned of, and Naomi answers between sniffles, confessing that she stopped reading halfway through the report the first time because the words felt too final, too heavy, admitting she Googled symptoms at 3 in the morning until panic attacks blurred her vision, admitting she imagined futures she was too ashamed to say out loud, futures where everything she planned, career, relationships, motherhood, independence, felt suddenly conditional, fragile, and this is where the scene deepens from confession into reckoning, because her mother listens with a face that is both breaking and building itself back together, absorbing Naomi's fear without letting it dominate the room, reminding her daughter that test results are information, not destiny, that knowledge gives them power even when it hurts, but also admitting, in a rare moment of parental vulnerability, that she's terrified too, that pretending she isn't would be another lie layered on top of the first, and Naomi looks at her like she's seeing her not just as mom, but as a woman who has faced her own medical scares, her own moments of powerlessness, and that shared honesty bridges something that had been quietly widening between them for years, and when Naomi whispers that she thought her mother would be disappointed in her for lying, for being sick, for not being strong enough, her mother responds with a firmness that cuts through the fog, telling her that disappointment has never lived where love resides, that illness is not a failure, and that the bravest thing Naomi has done all season is tell the truth now, even if it came late. And the camera doesn't shy away from the tears streaming down both of their faces, because Beyond the Gates understands that strength and softness can coexist, that resilience often looks like sitting on a bed with your mascara running and your world tilting, and as the scene widens we see the implications rippling outward. This confession will not stay contained in this room, it will touch every corner of the family, every relationship Naomi has tried to keep steady by withholding reality, and there's a quiet beat where Naomi asks, barely audible, "What if everything changes?" And her mother answers without hesitation, "Then we change with it." A line that feels less like reassurance and more like a promise forged in shared resolve. And when Naomi finally falls asleep against her mother's shoulder, exhausted by weeks of fear and minutes of honesty, her mother stays awake, staring at the test results once more with a jaw set in determination, already planning, already preparing to fight for her child in ways Naomi never had to ask for. And the episode closes not on answers, but on commitment, signaling to the audience that this storyline isn't about shock value or tragedy porn, but about the long, complicated, intimate journey of facing hard truths as a family, and as viewers, we're left with the lingering ache of recognition that sometimes love means telling the truth even when it shatters the illusion of safety, and sometimes the gates we're most afraid to open are the ones that lead us back into each other's arms. What makes the continuation of this storyline so quietly devastating is that Beyond the Gates refuses to let Naomi's confession exist in a vacuum, and instead allows it to echo through the house in the hours that follow, the truth hanging in the air like a scent that won't dissipate, as Naomi's mother moves through the kitchen later that night on autopilot, touching familiar objects, a mug, a chair, the counter edge, as if grounding herself in routine might keep the fear from spiraling, while Naomi wakes in the early morning hours disoriented and panicked, momentarily forgetting she's no longer alone with this secret before the memory of her mother's arms around her settles in, bringing both comfort and a new wave of anxiety, because now the lie is gone, and with it the illusion of control, and when they meet again over untouched breakfast plates, there's an awkward tenderness between them, a sense that the rules of their relationship have subtly changed, that honesty has stripped away something protective, but replaced it with something sturdier. And Naomi finally admits that the worst part wasn't even the results themselves, but the waiting, the limbo, the sense that her body had become a ticking clock she couldn't hear but constantly felt, and her mother listens, nodding slowly, then surprises Naomi by confessing that she suspected something was wrong all along. Not the specifics, not the diagnosis, but the distance, the way Naomi stopped talking about the future with excitement and started talking about it like a checklist. And this revelation hits Naomi hard because it reframes her secrecy as something that didn't shield her mother nearly as well as she believed, and for the first time she allows herself to feel a flicker of anger too, anger at the test, at the doctors who spoke in cautious euphemisms, at herself for believing she had to shoulder it all, and that anger leaks out in sharp, trembling words as she asks why these things always happen quietly, why there's never a clear villain to fight, just numbers on a page that slowly rearrange your life, and her mother answers honestly that sometimes the enemy is uncertainty itself, and the only way through it is together, not because together magically fixes anything, but because together means you don't have to pretend you're okay when you're not. And the episode deepens further when Naomi admits she hasn't told anyone else. Not her partner, not her closest friend, because once more people know, the truth becomes heavier, more permanent. And her mother gently challenges that instinct, pointing out that isolation feeds fear, that secrets grow sharper in the dark, and while Naomi isn't ready yet, the seed is planted, setting up future confrontations that will ripple outward in messy, human ways. And what elevates this arc is how Beyond the Gates allows Naomi moments of contradiction, moments where she's brave one second and terrified the next, cracking a dark joke about hospital gowns before dissolving into tears when she realizes humor won't save her, and her mother doesn't correct her or minimize her fear. She simply stays, modeling a kind of parental love that isn't about fixing but about witnessing. And later, when Naomi finally voices the thought she's been circling since the test, what if I lose who I am? The show lands another emotional blow, because her mother answers not with platitudes but with memory, reminding Naomi of who she's been through every crisis she's already survived, listing moments of strength Naomi forgot counted, reframing identity not as something illness erases, but something it reveals in painful clarity. And by the time the episode fades out, the audience understands that this storyline isn't racing toward a single dramatic outcome, but unfolding as a layered exploration of fear, love, and the cost of silence, where the real tension lies not in what the test results say, but in how Naomi learns to live with them out loud, and in choosing to let her mother see her scared, messy, uncertain self. Naomi crosses an invisible gate, one that separates being alone from being held, and Beyond the Gates once again proves that its greatest power isn't spectacle, but its willingness to sit in emotional truth long enough for it to bruise, breathe, and ultimately bind its characters closer than they were before. As the days begin to unfold after that confession, Beyond the Gates leans even harder into the slow burn of consequence, showing how a single moment of honesty can quietly reorder an entire household. As Naomi's mother starts making phone calls in hushed tones from the hallway, her voice calm but edged with urgency, while Naomi pretends not to listen even though every word lands like a pulse in her chest. And there's something profoundly unsettling about watching Naomi become a bystander in her own crisis, realizing that once the truth is shared it develops a momentum of its own, moving forward whether she feels ready or not. And this loss of control both terrifies and relieves her, because for weeks she believed carrying the burden alone was the only way to survive, and now she's learning that survival can also look like delegation, like letting someone else ask the hard questions she's too scared to articulate. And when her mother finally sits her down to talk logistics, appointments, specialists, second opinions, the conversation is almost businesslike, deliberately so because structure becomes a shield against panic. Yet even in this practical exchange, emotion seeps through the cracks, especially when Naomi hesitates at the mention of telling the rest of the family, her silence stretching long enough to say everything words won't. And her mother doesn't push, but gently reminds her that secrecy already took so much from her, that there's a difference between privacy and isolation, and Naomi admits she's afraid of becoming the lens through which everyone sees her, afraid that concern will replace normalcy, that pity will sneak into every interaction. And this fear feels achingly real because Beyond the Gates understands the social cost of illness, the way it can quietly rewrite how people treat you before anything physical ever changes, and later, in a beautifully understated scene, Naomi overhears her mother crying alone in the bathroom, stifling sobs into a towel, and instead of retreating, Naomi does something radically brave. She knocks, enters, and holds her mother this time, reversing roles in a way that underscores the episode's central truth. Strength is not static. It moves between people, shared and redistributed as needed, and Naomi apologizes again for lying, but this time her mother stops her mid-sentence, telling her that apologies won't heal what fear caused, but honesty might, and that line lands with quiet authority, reframing the entire arc not as a moral failure but as a human response to terror. And as the episode progresses, Naomi begins to speak more openly, testing the boundaries of vulnerability in small ways, admitting she's scared of the pain, admitting she doesn't know how to plan for a future that suddenly feels conditional, admitting that part of her is angry at her own body, and each confession is met not with alarm but with presence, her mother listening without trying to smooth over the rough edges, allowing Naomi to feel without correction, and this patient witnessing becomes the show's emotional backbone, because Beyond the Gates resists the urge to rush toward inspirational speeches or tidy conclusions, instead letting discomfort breathe. And when Naomi finally says out loud that she's afraid her life will now be defined by this test, her mother responds with a devastatingly simple truth, that this may shape her life, but it will never eclipse it. And by the time the episode closes, with Naomi standing at the window watching the sun rise over Fairmont Crest, test results folded but no longer hidden, the audience understands that the real transformation has already begun, not in a hospital room or doctor's office, but in the quiet choice to stop carrying fear alone. And Beyond the Gates leaves us with a powerful, resonant message that lingers long after the screen fades to black. That truth doesn't erase pain, but it gives love somewhere to stand. And sometimes the bravest thing a daughter can do isn't being strong for her mother, but trusting her mother to be strong with her. What elevates this arc even further is how Beyond the Gates allows Naomi's internal battle to remain front and center even after the secret is out, refusing to suggest that confession is a cure-all, and instead portraying it as the beginning of a far more complicated emotional journey, because while her mother's support is unwavering, Naomi now has to sit with feelings she once kept buried under denial. And the show lingers on those quiet moments when bravery gives way to exhaustion, when Naomi stares at her phone, unable to return messages, when she pauses mid-laugh because joy suddenly feels fragile, conditional, as though she's borrowing it on credit, and there's a devastating realism in how she oscillates between hope and dread, cracking one moment and resolute the next, as if her mind is constantly negotiating with a future that refuses to be clearly defined. And in one particularly striking sequence, Naomi confesses to her mother that she's afraid to dream now, afraid that planning anything beyond the next appointment will feel like tempting fate, and her mother doesn't correct that fear or dismiss it. She acknowledges it as valid, admitting that uncertainty steals imagination before it steals anything else, and that shared admission deepens their bond in a way words alone never could. And as the story unfolds, Naomi begins to realize that her lie didn't just isolate her from others. It fractured her relationship with herself, because pretending everything was fine forced her to silence her intuition, her fear, her instincts, and reclaiming the truth means relearning how to trust her own emotional responses again, a theme Beyond the Gates explores with impressive subtlety, particularly when Naomi admits she sometimes feels guilty for being scared, as if fear itself is a betrayal of strength. And her mother counters this by reframing courage not as the absence of fear, but as the willingness to live honestly alongside it, and this philosophical grounding gives the storyline weight beyond plot mechanics, transforming it into a meditation on vulnerability in a culture that often equates silence with resilience. And the ripple effects continue when Naomi tentatively agrees to let her mother accompany her to the next appointment, a small but monumental step that signals her gradual acceptance that support does not equal weakness. And yet, even in that decision there's tension, because Naomi fears being seen at her most exposed, fears losing autonomy in the very act of being helped. And the show honors that fear by letting it exist without judgment, showing Naomi wrestle with it in private before voicing it aloud. And when she finally does, her mother reassures her that partnership doesn't erase independence, it reinforces it. And this line quietly reframes the entire mother-daughter dynamic, shifting it from protector and protected to allies standing shoulder to shoulder against the unknown. And as the episode nears its end, Naomi reflects on how close she came to never telling the truth at all, confessing that part of her believed silence could freeze time, could keep life from changing if she just didn't speak it into existence. And that admission lands with haunting clarity because it taps into a universal human impulse, the belief that naming a fear gives it power. Yet beyond the gates, Jen.